Joining us now is Kathleen Willey, and she's a Virginian. Many have heard of Kathleen Willey. She was one of the first people in the nation to say that Bill Clinton sexually assaulted her, and the Clinton machine, we think, protected the president in the best way that they know how, which is by discrediting the accuser. But she is joining us now to give her story. She's also got a new website out, which is kind of a fun read. It's called ascandaladay.com, ascandaladay.com. Kathleen Willey, may I call you Kathleen, Miss Willey?
Please do. Good morning.
Kathleen, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
You know, when this happened, there's a lot of our listeners that have no idea about this because it was over 2 decades ago. Many of the millennials that tune us in or some of the younger people kind of vaguely remember it. But I know you've got a new website, but if I could, I just want to start with your story that really I never thought got the legitimate play it should have based on the level of your personal credibility throughout your life. But what actually happened, Kathleen?
Well, to give you a little bit of history, my late husband and I started Virginians for Clinton. He was always very active in politics. As you probably remember, his dad was president pro tem of the state senate for years and years and years, and he was very powerful. And so he was always involved in politics, and after we got married, I did. But we met Bill Clinton during Doug Wilder's campaign for lieutenant governor, and for whom I was working at the time, and we met him at a fundraiser at the Kluge Estate in Charlottesville, and we were very impressed with him. And when he decided to run for president, the campaign contacted us, and we started Virginians for Clinton and opened up a campaign office for him in our suites of in our legal office, and so we were very active in his campaign, and we raised a lot of money for his campaign. After he was elected, I worked on the inaugural, and then after that, I started working in the social office. I was commuting up to Washington from Richmond, and in the fall, in November of 1993, my husband got himself into some very serious legal and financial problems. And because the president was a friend of ours, I decided that my best shot at that time for a job to help my family and to help my husband was just to ask him for his help. And so I went to the White House. It was a Sunday. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving, and I went up to work and I asked to see him. And I had been trying to reach my husband all day, and without success. I called his office numerous times, spoke to his secretary. She hadn't heard from me. So I was in a state of panic when I walked into the Oval Office, and I sat down and I started to tell the president a little bit about what was going on, and I knew I had a very short window because they had fit me in between some meetings, and so, I started to explain, and I was upset, and he said, "I can see you're upset. Would you like a cup of coffee?" And I said, "Well, yes, thank you." And so he said, "Well, let's go back here." So
this was in the Oval Office, Kathleen.
That was in the Oval Office, and he said, "Well, I've got a little kitchen back here beyond this door, and we can go back there and get you a cup of coffee and so you can finish telling me what's going on." So I didn't think anything of that, and he was a friend, and so he himself fixed the coffee, and he said, "Well, let's go in here to my private study. We can have a little more privacy here." And I thought, well, okay. I mean, I had no intention of staying long. But as it turns out, that was the private study where he and Monica met many times. And so we went in there, and I never sat down. I stood up in the doorway, and he was sitting down, and I told him what was going on, and I just said, "I just need a job. I can't volunteer anymore. And if you could help me get a job, it would certainly be a help to get one with the government in Richmond. But at this point, I'll take anything." And like I said, I wanted to move it along because I knew that I didn't have a whole lot of time. And he also asked me how things were going in the social office, and I told him a few things about what was going on over there. And so I just said, well, I said, well, thank you for your time, and I got up to, I moved to go out into the hall, back to the door that went to the Oval Office, and he was behind me, and he said, well, here, let me take your coffee, and he took my coffee, and he put it down, and the next thing I knew, he had me cornered, and just like all the other story that you hear, I mean, without going into all the dirty details of it, which are still uncomfortable after all these years, you know, he was just all over me and, you know, whispering in my ears, and I just didn't know what to do. And I just kept trying to get away from him. I remember saying, aren't you afraid that Hillary's going to walk in here or somebody? And he just looked at me and he said, no, I know where everybody is all the time. And then at that point, his aide, Andrew Friendly, started banging on that door saying, Mr. President, you have a meeting. And I thought, thank God. And it didn't distract him one iota. And so I just, you know, was trying to think, all right, what do I do here? Do I slap him, or do I push him, or is the Secret Service going to descend on me? Or I mean,
so
it's
was
a very
he,
awkward
Kathleen,
situation.
So, Kathleen, was he? I mean, at this time, you felt you were in a position not to be able to just walk away. So, was there an actual sexual assault that went on, or was it just?
Yep.
There was a sexual assault, the fondling, touching, inappropriate behavior, something that. If I did that, I would be brought up on charges,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And the one thing that I remember distinctly, and I had been privy to Paula Jones's sexual harassment case because it landed in the counsel's office, and I had been doing a little bit of volunteering over there. I would go back and forth between there and the social office, and so I had seen the lawsuit, and it was just kind of sitting around one day, which was kind of typical of that administration. There were a lot of things sitting around that I should have never been able to see. You know, background checks on Supreme Court judges were just lying around, and but anyway, the one thing that struck me was in Paula Jones's sexual harassment case, she described when she went into that hotel room when he invited her in, that his face got beet red, and that's what happened in the situation with me. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, Paula Jones is telling the truth, because I didn't want to believe her at the time. I didn't want to believe any of the stories. I mean, we had supported him fully and believed him. And but anyway, Andrew started banging on the door again, and that was my one shot to get out of there, and which I did. And he followed me out, and he quickly sat behind his desk, and I just remember trying to get myself together and going to the door across the other side of the room and thinking, who in God's name is waiting for me on the other side? And given his reputation, I just thought, I don't even want to know. Mm-hmm. And I opened the door, and there stood Lloyd Benson and Leon Panetta, and another woman, I think Laura Tyson was her name, and I just remember just practically running out of there as quickly as I could. And I never had any intention of going public with that story. I told some good friends about what happened, and who I thought that I could trust. And but I never wanted it to go anywhere. I was never going to blow the whistle or use it for any kind of private gain or political anything. And then that was in 1993. And unfortunately, I mean, sadly, tragically, my husband took his own life that same day. And
oh my God.
From what the medical examiner told us and the state police, ironically, we think it was just around the same time that I was in the Oval Office. And so, our lives fell apart after that. And it's you're never the same. You just figure out how to live with it. But fast forward to 1997, and Paula's case was moving along, and her lawyer started looking for other women. I mean, I heard all of those rumors, and the next thing I knew, they found me. And I opened up the computer one day, and in the early days when we were all on different websites that were just getting started, Fox News was brand new, and there was my name at the top of Drudge, and I thought, well, here we go. And, you know, in my life, all hell broke loose. The phone never stopped ringing. I didn't know what to do when you're just a regular person and you get caught up in something like that, not of your own doing. You just don't know what to do, and you know who to call, where to go, how to handle it. You just don't. And anyway, they subpoenaed me to be deposed in Judge Meredith's federal court in Richmond, and my lawyer and I, Dan Gecker, who's been in Richmond a long time,
right,
and well known,
ran for state
months
senate.
to get out. Yeah, tried for months to get out of that. Months, and the president's lawyer, Bob Bennett, became our new best friend. He was making practically weekly trips to Richmond, offering all the services of their big law firm, and we can't let Kathleen go through this. Well, they were really worried about my testimony, and he pressured me for months as to, you know, what had happened, how it happened, you know, suggesting it was just a boorish past. And I never told him. It was none of his business at the time. And I didn't tell him, Dan didn't tell him, we didn't tell him anything. I mean, they were clearly coming down here and trying to pressure us. And anyway, you can't get out of a federal subpoena. There's no way you can get out of it, as hard as we tried. And the time came, and the date came, and you know. But before that, once my name came out, all of the terror tactics started. And I had moved from our family home where we'd raised our children for 23 years, and I had moved out to the country, and I was pretty isolated, and weird things had started happening. I woke up one morning, and my tires were slashed, I mean, 3 of them were, and I got the car up to the service station, and I remember, I'll never forget it, because I was just there yesterday getting my tires changed, and I remembered it was like it was yesterday. I was talking to the owner about it while I was in there, and who's still there, and I just remember sitting out in the sun. It was like September, I think, and my name had come out in August. It was September, October, and it was nice and cool, and I was sitting out front on a bench, and I remember one of the technicians came out, and he said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And he had my car up on a rack, and he said, "Somebody shot your tires out with a nail gun." And I said, "What?" And because I'm sitting there thinking, have I been in any kind of construction site? You know, there's nothing going around me where I live. And he just said, "Here, look. I mean, there's a clear pattern here. This is a nail gun." And I'll never forget, ever. He just looked at me and he said, "You don't have any enemies, do you?" And it was so ironic that he said that. And because I said, "Well, you know, I don't think so," because, I mean, at that point, I was in serious denial. When all of these things started, I kept thinking, well, you're just, you know, you're just imagining things. These things aren't real. I mean, these are just a bunch of coincidences they're just happening, and nobody from your government is going to do this to you. And, but then it got serious. And one of my pets disappeared, who rarely left the front porch. She was getting very old, and
the cat.
My German Shepherd, who never left my side, just vanished into thin air for 3 days. I mean, and showed up on the 4th morning at my kitchen door at 5:00 in the morning without a scratch on her. It wasn't like she'd gotten stuck somewhere or locked in somewhere. I mean, she was clean, and she wasn't particularly hungry, and you know, it was just one thing after the other. I found somebody roaming around my house at 3:00 in the morning under my deck. I saw a shadow in the light, and from the light that was on down there, and it was just constantly. All of these things had lots of phone calls, people hanging up. Weird phone calls like, we're from the power company and we're getting ready to turn the power off, and we just wanted to check first to see if you have any small children or elderly adults there? And I said, well, no. And I hung up, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I've never gotten a phone call like that. And it was basically just people harassing me, trying to find out if I was the one here, or if, if I was actually in this house. And I remember calling my lawyer right after that, and I said, is that weird or what? And he just said, did the number show up on your caller ID? And I said, yeah. And he said, call the number back and see who it is. Well, we need to figure out what's going on here. And so the phone rang off the hook. Nobody ever answered, but it was that kind of a thing. I'm a real pet lover, and I rescue animals, and I went out of town for about a week, and I never ever, I got to the point where I never told anybody I was leaving town until I got there. Mm-hmm. I just didn't. And I no sooner got to my destination when the woman who owned the shelter the kennel where I took my animals, called me up, and she said, the first thing she said was, everything's okay, but I just wanted to make sure that it's okay. This woman called and said that she's going to come over and pick up your pets. And I mean, it's a house full. It was like 3 dogs and 3 cats. Mm-hmm. And she said she just called. She'll be over shortly to pick them up. And because you had called her and said that you changed your mind, that you wanted her to keep them. And I just said I never made any such phone call whatsoever, none whatsoever. So obviously I was being followed. Somebody had seen me, had followed me to that kennel. And I just wasn't aware of it. I thought I was aware of it because I got to the point where I became very vigilant.
I want to get back to something that I remember reading. I was at the Richmond debate in 92. I think it was October. Mm-hmm. This was the debate where I thought, my opinion, Bill Clinton won the election when he walked up to the edge of the stage and engaged that woman who asked him about her balloon mortgage. Of course, the answer didn't have anything to do with the government, but he showed empathy, and he basically said, I feel your pain, where the president gave a very clinical answer. I thought that 5 minutes, Clinton won. But I remember reading, and correct me on this, that you had called him that night after the debate to congratulate him, and he was sick or he had a sore throat or something, and he invited you into his hotel room, and you declined. That's wrong.
That's slightly wrong.
Okay.
He arrived at the Richmond airport a couple of days before the debate. He was on his way to Williamsburg for a couple of days of debate prep. And the lieutenant governor at the time, Don Beyer, put a call out to Democratic activists to join him at the airport to welcome the president. So I and a bunch of people got in a car and drove down there, and we were all there waiting. And he got off the plane and he came around and he worked the rope line and said hello to everybody. And I had met him before that. My husband and I had met him at a number of fundraisers in Washington and Maryland, and so he remembered me when he saw me, and basically, nice to see you again, blah blah blah. But anyway. And interestingly enough, all of this is on tape, is on a videotape that one of the local TV stations took. So he went back towards the airplane to get into his car, and he stopped, and you could see him asking Don Beyer, pointing to me and asking him who I was, and you could see Don telling him. I didn't see any of this. But the next thing I knew, his assistant, who turned out to be his assistant in the Oval Office, Nancy Hernreich, came over and said to me, the president would like to talk to you later. He would like your phone number. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's great. That's
sure,
that's the president, the governor. And I said, well, okay. And my husband and I had been working on a private reception and a fundraiser after the debate, and then a public rally after the debate here in Richmond, because the debate was at the University of Richmond. And so I've been working on that. But the one thing that we couldn't get, even doing all that work, was tickets to the debate. So I remember I got in the car, and that's when we the dawn of cell phones and car phones. And I called my husband right away, and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but the governor's going to call me when he gets to Williamsburg." And I said, "Maybe we can get debate tickets after all." That was the fellow that I cared about.
Right.
And he said, "Well, great. Well, don't forget to ask him." So I no sooner got home when the phone rang, and it was him. And he lost his voice. I could hardly hear him. And he was saying, "Well, I'm in Williamsburg. Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm right outside of Richmond." And I said, "You sound terrible. How are you going to have get your voice back?" And I just kiddingly said, "It sounds like you need some chicken soup." Mm-hmm. That was the famous chicken soup episode.
Right.
And that's when he said, "Well, would you bring me some?" And I just said, "Well, I guess." I mean, I just was so taken back by it, and I said, "Well, let me call you back later." And so I kind of got out of it, and I remember I called my husband back, and I said, and I did, and one thing I did say to him was, "We'd really like some tickets to the debate if you could help me out with that. We'd really like them." So I asked him, and he said, "Well, let me call you back later. There's a lot going on here." So he called me. He called me back later, and he said, "No, Hillary's not going to be here for a couple of days, and I'm kind of surrounded by Secret Service agents, and I can probably get rid of them here for a while. So can you bring that chicken soup down?" And I just said, "I don't think so." And I mean, he's very open about the whole thing. I was just the whole time my mind is reeling, and I'm just thinking to myself, are all of these rumors true? I just don't want to believe these rumors are true. And then once again, I just said, "But before you hang up, can we get the tickets to the debate?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if I can get my hands on them." And I said, "Well, if you can, who can?" And basically, I said, "I guess you'll be at the fundraiser after the debate. I guess I'll see you then." And I did, and he was nice, and overly nice. I mean, nothing inappropriate, but just nice. And thanked me for all my hard work. And my husband, he was there with me. And so that was kind of my first idea.
Right, that maybe there was something.
All these rumors were really true.
Right, maybe there was something squirrely going on.
Right,
but still, going into the Oval Office, you're not expecting to be sexually assaulted. Obviously,
I went to see him as a friend.
Right.
I went to see him as a friend in need. It's as simple
at a vulnerable time in your life, right?
Well, yeah, and it's just, like I said, the worst part. I mean, that was bad. I mean, the tragic part of that whole day was the loss of my husband and the loss of my children's dad, and he took his own life, and that's just the kind of thing that you just never get over. It never goes away. You never get over it. And the reason people were saying, "Well, why are you still out here? Well, why are you doing this?" Well, I'll tell you why I'm doing it, because it's the right thing to do, and I want people to know, and I want the millennials to know, and like you said, hopefully they're listening, because they're the people that I want to target. They're the ones that I want to hear this story, and hopefully after Labor Day, when the campaign really kicks into full gear, I'll be given the opportunity to do that. But what I want people in this country to know, and in this state to know, is that 2 days before my deposition in federal court, I was out. I live in the country. I am extremely hard to find. Extremely hard to find. I wanted it that way when I moved out here. And I was out walking early in the morning with my dogs, and it was very early, and somebody came, I thought was a neighbor. I was new out here. I hadn't met everybody. He was out jogging. He stopped me. He called me by name. He said, "Did you ever find your cat?" Well, it was the cat that went missing. And then he said, and I said no, and I said, "I look for him every day when I come home. I just know he's going to be waiting on the front step for me." And then he said, "Did you ever get those tires fixed?" And that's when I thought, something's not right here. And that's when I said, "Who are you?" And that's when he said, "Yeah, that cat, he was a Bullseye was his name. He was a nice cat." Well, I had signs up, he was lost. I had a picture. He had his his name tag on his collar with his name, and he said, yeah, he was a really nice cat. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going bad real fast. And I was really scared. I was terrified. And I kept asking him who he was. And this is what I want people to know. This man asked me how my children were by name. He knew their addresses. He knew where they lived. In other cities, they were not living in Richmond at the time. He asked me how they were doing, and it was the most menacing, terrifying moment, one of the most terrifying in my life, because he was clearly threatening my children and their families at the time. And, and they were threatening me to keep me silent. This is a woman who's a lawyer who was threatening me to stay silent by going into a federal court and lying under oath. And here we are, and this woman's running for president, and I think people in this country need to know this. What kind of a woman, what kind of a mother, what kind of a grandmother threatens the lives of another woman's children for political gain? And that's the bottom line of why I'm still out here. Because I want people to know this story. And I'm not the only person that's been threatened like this.
Well, Kathleen, wait, back up a second. Kathleen, what was Hillary's direct involvement in this whole episode?
Well, we have evidence of the fact, and I write about it in my book called Target Caught in the Crosshairs of Bill and Hillary Clinton. She had 3 of the best private investigators in the country on her payroll. And state troopers have testified to this. Private investigators have, they've tried to get out of it, but they pretty much admitted that they were hired by Hillary Clinton using campaign funds to just intimidate us, to threaten us, to terrify us. Any woman who had the unfortunate opportunity, to cross paths with Bill Clinton, and that's what Hillary Clinton has done. He has, just like Donald Trump said, she has enabled his behavior for 40-some years now. She knew exactly what she was getting into when she married him. Barely 2.5 years into their marriage, he raped Juanita Broderick brutally. He raped a woman when he was at Oxford. People don't know this. He never graduated from Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. But he's a Rhodes Scholar, but he never graduated from that program because after he raped a woman by the name of Eileen Wellstone, they kicked him out of the country. And people don't know this. This is all documented. And all of this has been it's just been wiped clean, speaking of wiping things clean, by the Clinton machine. And a lot of people don't know these stories. And they're out there. All you have to do is, get Roger Stone's book, The Clinton Chronicles. I mean, there have been many books written by people. I mean, there was another private investigator in Maryland who was hired by this bunch to come down here and just mess with me and to cause me trouble. And he was so troubled by what his instructions were that he actually called me with an anonymous name and warned me. I never talked to him. He left a message on my answering machine.
What
he
did
said
it
he was
say?
going to call me the next night. And at that point, I was a cooperating witness, and I was under FBI protection.
Right.
And they immediately tried to trap the call because he said he was going to call back the next day. And luckily for me, he volunteered to
What was the message you left?
Pardon?
What was the message you left?
There are bad people out to hurt you. You need to be careful.
All right, so what evidence do you have that Hillary was involved? Because, I mean, Bill Clinton got elected 2 times. His term's over.
Because private investigators have said that they were hired by Hillary Clinton. One of them, Jack Palladino, a very well-known private investigator, he's got a team with his wife, not a very good reputation, but he just doesn't. He admitted that he'd been hired, but he said, the biggest mistake that whole thing was that she didn't pay him in a timely fashion. I mean, it's documented. It's documented. Christopher Hitchens wrote a book about this. I mean, Sidney Blumenthal just happened to have a scheduled lunch with Christopher Hitchens the day after my 60 Minutes interview. But we all know how close Sid Blumenthal is to Hillary Clinton. And at that lunch, basically, Christopher said, "No, it looks like your guy's in trouble after that interview on 60 Minutes last night." And Sid Blumenthal said, "Well, Kathleen Willey might look good today, but she's not going to look pretty good. She's not going to look good by the end of the week." And Christopher Hitchens was so incensed by that. And they were friends. They were good friends. And he went he volunteered to testify before Ken Starr's grand jury. So there are good people out there who saw what these people were up to, and they volunteered. And, you know, when you're somebody like Christopher Hitchens or Jared Stern, who's a private investigator, you know, and that's his job to do these things in a clandestine manner.
Right.
No, then you know, there are good people out there who testified to what was really going on. So, you know, there's proof. There's documented proof of all of this.
So,
and I'm not, you know, and you've got a pattern also. I mean, we're not all making this stuff up.
Right.
Read Eric Burns' new book about, you know, the former Secret Service agent. I mean, there was a Secret Service agent at the White House who was forced to testify before the grand jury about Monica Lewinsky. And the day after that, the president sought him out. They'd never met before. They sought him out in the reception room at the White House, and basically went up and said hello and good morning. Well, how are your wife and kids doing? Well, you know, and the Secret Service agent took that as a threat.
right.
I just thought when I heard him tell that story when he was being interviewed on TV, I thought, well, I've heard that one before. I mean, you see a pattern of these things that happen. You can't make this stuff up. How can we all have the same story to tell without knowing each other?
So you're sexually assaulted in the Oval Office by the President of the United States. You never got your day done, and Hillary is out there willingly covering this up, enabling his behaviors. That's basically what the gist of this is, right?
That's basically what's going on. She threatened Juanita Broderick. You know, state troopers started following Paula Jones after that event. I mean, these are the kinds of things that she does. I mean, ask Betsy Wright. You know, they're the one. The word bimbo eruption. I mean, Hillary was so up in arms about Donald Trump calling Megyn Kelly a bimbo. I just thought, I thought, well, you know, she's been calling me a bimbo for the last 18 years.
Right. Well,
what's worse? You know, I mean, that's what I'm saying. She coined that phrase.
We all remember covering this, what they called in the campaign, the 92 campaign, the bimbo eruptions that they had to keep stomping out like whack-a-mole. But again, you know, the Bill Clinton, you know, episode is well in the past. The issue now is, you know, why did Hillary know? When did she know it? What was her involvement in it? And allegedly you're saying, you know, she was involved in hiring private investigators and other people that threaten you. And
the point here is this. This isn't about indiscretions or infidelities or sex or girlfriends or any of that stuff anymore. Everybody knows those details, okay? We're sick. Nobody wants to hear those details anymore. This is about a woman who's running for president who claims to be an advocate for women and children, okay? And she's out there hiring her hired secret police, her hired goons, intimidating and threatening the women who crossed paths with her husband, who were attacked by him, who were raped by him, okay? That's what's going on here. Who's threatening the lives of another woman's children. That's what's going on here. It's not about that infidelity. That's over and done with. It's about what this woman's advocate, this children's advocate, is really about. That's what's going on here. That's why this story needs to be told. This woman does not deserve to be president of this great country. She's a joke, and she's a liar, and she's an opportunist, and she will do and say anything to get elected. And I fear for this country if she does.
Kathleen Willey, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to have you back. Kathleen, I want to also thank you for your courage in speaking out. I know it must be tough to have this episode relived. And again, you know, there's a lot of people millennials and others that really don't remember this, like some of the more mature people like I do. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you for the courage that you've displayed today. For more information, you can go to Kathleen's new website, A Scandal a Day. You just spell it out, ascandaladay.com, A Scandal a Day.
And also my Facebook page. There's a Facebook page that's a whole lot more interactive called A Scandal a Day.
All right.
And that's got a lot of followers.
Facebook, A Scandal a Day. Kathleen, thanks for being with me.
You're most welcome. My pleasure. Have a good day.
All right. Kathleen Willey. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. We'll be back.